Today we are going to go through how to solve systems of equations using elimination when we have to kind of change some things around before we can actually eliminate. So that's learning target 5.5. So if you go back to these steps that we've been talking about for solving systems of equations, the first step is always to write the system of equations so that the terms are aligned. So that means our x's need to be stacked on top of each other and the y's need to be stacked on top of each other. Step 2 is going to be eliminate one of the variables. Okay, remember sometimes we need to do some extra work to do this, which is what we talked about yesterday. Then we're going to substitute the answer we get back in and write our answer as an ordered pair. Okay, so the only thing that's new today is that sometimes we have to move things around before we can actually eliminate. So we're going to go ahead and do 4 examples. The first example here, you'll notice that my x and y are actually lined up already. Okay, so that's one thing we need to pay attention to is just make sure my x's are stacked here and my y's are stacked here. If they are, I can go ahead and eliminate right away. Okay, so when I look at these, I can do one of 2 things, and I'm actually going to look at my y's. I notice that 4 and 3 are my coefficients there, and I know that 4 and 3 both go into 12. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to multiply the first equation by 3 and the second equation by 4. So if I do that, I get 12x minus 12y equals 24. And on the bottom, I get 40x plus 12y equals negative 76. Since I have opposites here, I can go ahead and cancel those y's and add the rest together. So 12x and 40x give me 52x. 24 and negative 76 actually give me negative 52. So if I divide by 52 on both sides, I can get x equals negative 1. I'm going to go ahead and plug that back in to find my y. So I'm going to plug this into the first equation. Remember, I'm replacing x with negative 1. So I don't have an x there anymore. Put a negative 1 in its place. And I'm going to solve. So negative 1 times 4 is negative 4. I'm going to bring everything else down. I'm going to add 4 to both sides. So I get negative 4y equals 12. And then divide by negative 4. So I get y equals negative 3. So my solution here should be negative 1, negative 3. I'm going to go ahead and plug this in quickly at the bottom. I'm going to plug it into that second equation just to make sure it works. So I'm going to do 10 times negative 1 plus 3 times negative 3 and make sure that it's equal to negative 19. So 10 times negative 1 is negative 10. 3 times negative 3 is negative 9. And negative 10 plus negative 9 is negative 19. So that works out. Look at the second system of equations here, and you'll notice that for my first terms, I actually have an x and a y. And then in the second pair, I have a y and an x. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take these 2 here, and I'm just going to flip them around so it's a little bit easier to deal with. So my first equation is going to stay the same. And my second equation, I'm going to rewrite it. So my x goes first, so I have negative 4x. My y goes second, negative 4y. Once I'm here, I can go ahead and use elimination. Notice that I already have 4's in front of my x's for the system of equations there. But since they're both negative, I need to go through and change my signs in one of the equations, and it doesn't matter which one. But since all of these were negative, I changed them all to positive. And now, when I go to add, my x's cancel. Negative 3y plus 4y gives me 1y, and 5 plus 4 is 9. I'm going to go ahead and plug this back in to find my x value. So when I do that, I'm going to go to the original problem. I'm going to replace my y with 9 this time because I solved for y, and solve for again. So negative 3 times 9 is negative 27. I'm going to add 27 to both sides. So I have negative 4x equals 32. divide by -4, and I find that x is -8. So my solution here should be -8, 9. Remember, to check it, I can plug it back into the original problem. I'm going to look at the second equation there. And I'm going to do -4 times y minus 4 times x equals -4. So I get -36 and a +32. And if I add those together, I actually get a -4. So we're in pretty good shape there. So like I said, the only difference here is that we had to rearrange these x and y's so they were lined up. Let's look at two more. Okay, same thing here. Looking at A, notice in my first problem, my x actually comes second. So we're going to rearrange that. So I have x first, and then I have a +10y. Okay, so since there's nothing here, remember it's a plus sign, equals -8. So instead of this first equation, I now have this one in purple. If you look at your coefficients, you'll notice that we actually don't need to do anything because I already have opposites in front of my x's. So I'm going to go ahead and add these two equations together. So these cancel. Notice, though, that I also have -10y and +10y. So those cancel as well. So I get 0. And then 10 and -8 gives me +2. And you'll remember from our last few lessons that if I get something that's not true, like 0 equals 2, okay, doesn't happen, it's not possible, my answer is simply no solution. Okay, so one last problem here. We're going to look at this closely. Notice my x's and my y's are already lined up. And you can multiply this by a few things to be able to get things canceled. But I notice for my y's here, if I multiply 2 by 6, I actually have opposites. Okay, so I'm going to multiply that whole first equation by 6. I get -12x plus 12y equals 120. And you'll notice now that my y's are going to cancel because I multiplied. So we're going to go ahead and add those two equations together. So -3x and -12x give me -15x. My y's cancel. And 30 plus 120 is 150. So I'm going to divide everything by -15 to get x equals -10. Now I'm going to take my answer and I'm going to go back to the original problems. I'm going to get rid of this extra stuff here. Go back to the original problems and plug that in for one of the two equations. So I'm going to plug this -10 in for my x in the first equation. So I'm going to do -2 times -10, replacing my x, plus 2y equals 20. So a negative times a negative gives me a +20. And since it's a +20, I need to subtract on both sides so that that cancels. And I have 2y equals 0. Now, this one is not no solution because my y is still there. Okay, it's only no solution if everything cancels out. 0 divided by 2 is 0. So I have -10, 0 for a solution. I can check that by plugging it into the second equation. So I'm going to do -3 times -10 minus 12 times 0 equals 30. Well, -3 times -10 is +30, and anything times 0 is 0. So 30 minus 0 is actually 0. So again, we're in pretty good shape there. You have 4 guided practice problems today. Go ahead and try all 4 of those, and then have us check them. Once we've checked them, you can go ahead and do your homework. Just a review or a recap, we solve systems using elimination, but when we had to move things around, you have an assignment today over that. Remember, some of them you have to change and some of them you don't. And then we have on Monday a mixed practice of solving systems of equations. So we're going to mix everything together and kind of talk about how to decide if I should use substitution or elimination. If you have any questions, make sure you raise your hand and ask. Otherwise, do those guided practice problems, and as long as you get them right, we'll give you your homework, and if not, we'll help you out a little bit more.